Watch The Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show with by far the cleanest flagpole. My name is Christy Powell. I'm joined again tonight by proud pearl polisher and newly minted co-host. Welcome, Kara Griffin.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Hi, everybody.
No, super excited to have you locked in and to be seeing a lot more of you. And tonight, you and I are going to be joined by writer and coach. Welcome, Sex Coach Shannon Burton.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Signed in from New Orleans and love being online as well, of course.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And as you are aware, tonight we're going to have a very sophisticated adult conversation. And before that, if I could get 30 seconds on the clock. Christy, we're going to be talking about cuffing the carrot,
Saucing the taco,
paddling the pink canoe,
flicking the bean,
menage a moi,
beating the bishop,
burping the worm,
shaking hands with the milkman,
the five-knuckle shuffle,
dopamine farming,
stamina mining,
having a threesome with a couple of no-shows,
double-clicking your mouse,
summoning the semen demon,
making Jesus cry,
churning the butter,
badgering the witness,
tickling the pickle.
Ooh, and we're out of time.
And there we go. All right. Well, we'll have to hold on to a few more for the end of the show. Maybe some bonus content.
Absolutely. And so hopefully everyone knows what we're going to be talking about tonight. If you are still not aware, that's okay. Hang on, keep watching. And don't forget, give us a call with your stories and questions at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/callsex because the show is coming right now.
All right. Well, that sound means we are starting this week where we start every week. Shannon, the best way to get to know somebody, I think, is to find out what turns them on. So what's got you worked up this week?
This week is a really special week, and it wasn't going to be until just a couple days ago. I got last-minute passes to Naughty Nolans, which is a huge lifestyle adult event being put on here in New Orleans. It's an annual event put on by Naughty Events, and they do these kind of events in multiple major cities all across the country. They also do Naughty Cruises, that kind of thing. But basically, it's a big educational opportunity. You get hands-on sexual instruction in a lot of different things. There's playrooms, there's clubs to go to. They basically take over an entire hotel in the French Quarter. And I am just super stoked for Naughty Nolans and really excited to go this weekend.
Yeah, no, a full hotel playroom. I mean, I'm sure it's not quite that open, but yeah, that sounds incredible. And New Orleans is always a good time. So something to look forward to. I'll make sure to have a link to that in the show notes for the episode.
Sure.
Kara, what's got you worked up right now?
Yeah, so right now I am gonna have to say it's the app called Headspace. It's a subscription-based service, but also there are videos, you can look them up on YouTube and everything like that. But it's for mindfulness and meditation practice, which is something that I've been working on more and incorporating into not just my daily routine, but also my self-care quality time routine as well, which I highly recommend. And the really cool thing is this past month for Pride, they had a lot of queer-focused programming too, which I thought was really good and enjoyed consuming. So I highly recommend it for anybody else that wants to add that to their day-to-day.
Yeah, you know what? I mentioned before the show, I used one of those meditations that was, for Pride Month this morning. And it was very, very calming. I definitely recommend it. We've been talking more and more about mindfulness on the show recently. And I hope that people are tuned into that because that's going to be a big part of this conversation. And honestly, just a word or a model or a framework for what I would call a healthy life. So I definitely encourage people to find their way to check that out.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, let's do it. The thing that we have been teasing, titillating, maybe edging up to this whole time, let's have that conversation, because we've spent a lot of time in the past debunking a bunch of myths around porn addiction and around, silly ideas about what masturbation can do to you and how it can make you go blind. And we've talked about how all of that is bullshit. But I don't know that we've done a great job of really discussing some of the benefits of masturbation. So, Shannon, I read a great piece that you wrote for your blog. I want to make sure that people know that the link for that will also be in the show notes for this episode. But Shannon, take it away. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts here about the benefits of masturbation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think masturbation's a great topic in that absolutely anyone can do it. Doesn't matter if you're in a relationship or single or in a situationship, no matter what's going on, you can masturbate. It's your body. It's a part of your body that feels good. In fact, your whole body can feel good if you do it in a way that feels good to you. It's unique to each person. There's no way to masturbate in every possible way that exists. So there's always something new to discover. So it's just this never ending source of sexual pleasure that comes from you. There's plenty of health benefits that studies have shown, things like helping people sleep better, feel less stressed, it releases those feel good endorphins, that kind of thing. But it also can improve your relationships with other people, whether that's romantic or otherwise, and help you sort of expand your comfort zone so that you can experience more of life, both in and outside the bedroom. There's so many ways that masturbation adds to our lives. So I just think more people should be doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like there is such a consolation prize kind of narrative around masturbation. Well, if you can't find somebody, just go fuck yourself. And I feel like people really miss out on the idea that masturbation is not a consolation for sex. Masturbation is sex. Sex isn't, or at least shouldn't be, defined as intercourse. But whenever I try and push that message, I get a lot of pushback. I mean, what can you say about that supposed hierarchy of sex?
Sure. I mean, if you're trying to get pregnant or get someone pregnant, then yeah, intercourse is most likely the kind of sex you're going to have. But we all know that there are multiple kinds of sex. We say the phrases oral sex, anal sex, titty sex. And so we know that those things are types of sex. We know they count. If you did it with someone else besides your monogamous partner, if you had one, they would probably consider those things cheating. You're deriving sexual pleasure from something with someone else. So why wouldn't solo sex or masturbation also be just as valid as all those other forms of sex? And I think part of the problem is this idea that sex is supposed to be for procreation. So people are just well, that's real sex, the kind of sex that could result in a pregnancy. That's real sex. Everything else isn't, it's whatever. But the reality is 99.999% of sex is not penis and vagina. And so yeah, I agree that, people make jokes about masturbation as oh, I guess you're masturbating because you can't find anyone to fuck you kind of thing. And that's really sad, because that tells me that people saying that have not experienced the kind of transformational solo sex that you can experience. I've definitely met people who can only orgasm through masturbation. And what are we telling them when we say that sex has to be partnered and that it doesn't count, if you're doing it by yourself? So I just think people need to be a little more open-minded about defining sex, definitely.
Yeah, and maybe break free of this sort of automatic pre-programmed notion that okay, I'm horny, I can't have sex, so I'll just pull out my phone and then, catch whatever is on the front page of Pornhub or whatever for 15 seconds and that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Of course that's not satisfying.
Oh yeah,
right?
I call that maintenance masturbation, right?
Yeah.
That's the, have a feeling, don't have time for anything else, or I just want to fall asleep, right? So you're just sort of maintaining
There's
it.
nothing wrong
And
with a quickie. I mean, I get that,
totally,
but
yeah.
every once in a while, I want a little romance.
Yeah. And then what happens is people think that that's all masturbation is. And that's almost like thinking quickies are the only kind of partnered sex you can have. Could you imagine if the only partnered sex you ever had was quickies? Your sex life would be very different, probably. And so it's the same with masturbation. If you would like to have almost like transformational experiences with masturbation, you are going to have to step outside of the box a little bit, and spend more than 5 minutes, whatever the video in front of Pornhub is today,
And y'all are efficient. I'm feeling like I'm doing it wrong.
Or right, maybe?
Maybe?
Depends. Maybe you're closer to right.
Sure, we'll go with that.
I always hate putting times on it because everyone's so different. That's another thing that I get is, people who say, "Oh, I'm so quick to orgasm, it takes me 10 minutes." And I'm like, that's not necessarily quick, depending on who your partner is, what your level of satisfaction is. And then completely on the other side, people say, "Oh, I take too long. I take a whole 3 minutes," or something like that. And so I hate putting times on things because it's all relative.
Sure.
It's completely up to you, your enjoyment. And if you are having sex with a partner, then your partner's enjoyment as well.
Yeah. Well, you mention in your article a number of different benefits. Is there anything in particular that you feel like people maybe aren't aware of or aren't leaning into as much as they could benefit from it?
Yeah, some of the more, for my friends who do sort of masturbate intentionally, as I describe it, those who do take the time to really sink into it, when they're sort of ready to level up, the stuff I start to introduce them to are things like orgasm control.
Mhm.
How long, you made a joke about edging, you kind of teased edging up earlier, but yeah, how long can you sort of take yourself to that edge, but not go over it? Can you go up to it and then can you back away from it? And then can you approach it again? And many people find that when they do edging and they experience that, and this is regardless of your body, your gender, anyone can do this. Many people find that the more they do that, the more they push themselves to the edge and back off, or push themselves to the edge and hold it for as long as they can, the more powerful their orgasms become. So for a lot of people, that can unlock sometimes the most powerful orgasm they've ever had in their life. And again, they're doing this alone. So again, don't tell me partnered sex is the only valuable sex if it's, giving people their most powerful orgasms. So that's a big one. Some people do use masturbation to help with partnered sex. For a lot of penis owners, orgasming before partnered sex with masturbation can help them last longer with a partner in partnered sex. So it's a very common use. And then increasingly, we're finally getting more and more studies about masturbation in vulva owners. And we're actually discovering that vulva owners who are comfortable with masturbation, and especially with sex toys, are more likely to orgasm during partnered sex and also experience more natural lubrication. So there are all these, things that we're still learning. Definitely, there's a lot of emerging information, but definitely, yeah, don't miss out on this stuff. It's good stuff.
To think about how fundamental this is. I mean, the fact that, and let's just go ahead and be frank and talk about it, the fact that even young infants will enjoy some level of self-stimulation and will participate in activities at very young ages where they are enjoying and exploring their body. And yet, as fundamental as masturbation is, we have so few research studies on it. We have so little academic and scientific interest because of these same purity culture, sex is for babies kind of thinking that is just all over our culture.
Absolutely. And it's something I often have to tell clients that I work with is any shame you have around this stuff is all learned. It's
Mm-hmm.
all stuff that you learned. You were not born ashamed of that area of your body. You were not born knowing to avoid it or associating sexual activity with, guilt. So anything that you're feeling there is learned. And if you would like to unlearn it, you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there is such a cultural narrative around the idea that masturbation will make you bad at sex, that it'll somehow like ruin you for partnered sex. And that's maybe particularly a idea that we throw at men because we don't even really acknowledge that women tend to masturbate. So that's a whole separate problem. But hearing you talk about edging and about orgasm control, about being able to, master your body in these different ways, that can only lead to better sex, right? Like that can only lead to more control and more like mindful, intentional experiences. I mean, how does that operate here?
Yeah, the vast majority of people I've worked with in terms of improving masturbation practices or even just getting more familiar with their bodies, because, in a lot of cases, people haven't ever been afforded a safe space to explore their own body. So sometimes we're just talking about very, very basic comfort stuff. But out of all the people I work with, I would say, 9 out of 10, it's all about improving their sex life, and their sex life does improve, whether it's with themselves or with partners or both. There are some cases, maybe 1 out of 10, where someone's girlfriend reaches out to me and says, my boyfriend won't have sex with me anymore because he's watching porn and masturbating instead, and our sex life has completely fallen apart. And so that obviously is an example of something, gripping someone's attention and a habit forming, and there's other relationship problems happening there.
Sure.
And things outside of sex that are also going on. So that requires a little bit more in-depth counseling. But yeah, for the vast majority of people seeking help with this kind of stuff, it is to improve sex life and to become way more comfortable being naked, being, sexually stimulated, finding pleasure in that without shame or guilt, and just unlocking these deeper levels of pleasure and feeling free to enjoy that pleasure without shame.
Sure. Well, we'll tease out some of the potential pitfalls or other concerns that might come up a little bit later in the episode. But for now, is it safe to say that for the vast majority of people, more time, more energy, more perhaps intentionality around masturbation is almost always a good thing?
Absolutely.
Is that too strong language?
No, I would say intentional masturbation, setting time aside for it and genuinely investing in good, prolonged masturbation experiences will improve your sex life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we've kind of flirted with the idea of mindfulness tonight and already talked very recently about more mindfulness in sex. How does that intentionality show up here? What would mindful masturbation look like?
Yeah, for those who are open to it, I sometimes get some resistance with mindfulness because some people think there's a spiritual aspect to mindfulness, and that's not necessarily the case for everyone. Plenty of people practice mindfulness without any kind of spiritual association. And so if you are open to mindfulness, and if you're not sure you're ready to do mindfulness and masturbation at the same time, that's okay. You can start with just one or the other and being more intentional with one or the other. And then when you're ready, introducing them to each other in, slow ways that feel comfortable for you. The wonderful thing about mindfulness is that it's so focused on being present in the moment and letting go of thoughts about the past and the future. And it allows you not only to be present in the moment with your pleasure while masturbating, but when you do that, you're practicing a mental habit that will carry over into partnered sex as well, allowing you to be more present in the moment with your partner. So many people get distracted during sex thinking about their to-do list, or they notice the pile of laundry in the room and they just get very distracted. The more you can learn to associate sexual pleasure with being present in the moment, and mindfulness is one way to do that, the more you're able to be present with your partners, whether now or in the future.
I am so glad you brought that up, Shannon, because that was exactly my hang up before I started doing any kind of like mindfulness or meditation. I actually only did it because a friend of mine like hooked me up with like a free trial to a program. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. But I thought it was going to be some kind of like woo woo thing. And, then we're going to do like, I didn't even know. I thought it was just not going to be my cup of tea because I don't like anything in the like spiritual realm. And it wasn't that at all. I was like, oh my goodness, why have I not been doing this more? It really is just getting in touch with what's happening and not distracting myself with random BS intrusive thoughts, that I didn't even realize I was having. I found it the same way you described, where, this is great for, being in my own head, but also that's really helpful when I'm interacting with another human too.
Yeah, it really, the skills are transferable, as we say, right?
Yeah.
And I think, just full disclosure so that, people can maybe see themselves in this a little bit more. I tried mindfulness maybe 4 different times over the course of 2 to 3 years, trying to get into it to manage anxiety, back in maybe 2016 and 17, and then 18, and then 19. And it took a while to really find, and I started it and then I stopped it and I started it and I stopped it. And then when I finally did manage to get into mindfulness in tiny increments, I would do 3 to 5 minutes a day because it was all I could tolerate. That still mattered. It still counted. It still meant I was spending 3 to 5 minutes emptying my mind. And then when we were all on lockdown and not allowed to go anywhere and
Sure.
dating in the way I normally date was irresponsible, I was by myself a whole awful lot. And this is how my own personal journey of mindful masturbation began was, okay, can I apply this to this thing over here? Can I touch myself and pleasure myself while being completely present with that pleasure? Can I challenge myself to not watch or listen to porn or erotica? Can I challenge myself to not fantasize about my crushes or think back to, previous good sexual experiences? Like, can I just get off on getting off? Is that possible? And that's really where I started to discover, oh, wow, there's like a whole other world of pleasure here. Let's share it with other people.
Yeah. No, Kara, I'm glad that you acknowledge some of that tension or discomfort that people often have around woo and some of these kinds of things, because I feel like a lot of people will tell me that they can't meditate or that mindfulness doesn't work for them. And I want to absolutely acknowledge that no single strategy is right for everybody, just like no single exercise is right for everybody. Like, I hate going to the gym. I hate using free weights, but I love doing cardio. Other people are the opposite in so many ways. And I just want to tell everybody that if a 3-minute meditation feels like a lot for you, that's okay. There are times in your exercise journey where a walk around the block might be a lot for you. So whether you are, running a marathon or whether you are working to stand up for the first time after an accident or heal from some injury or work through some other form of disability, whatever feels like exercise to you is exercise. And I think that applies to mindfulness. And if adding in a little masturbation, a little sexuality to your mindfulness makes it a lot less boring and a lot more appealing, maybe this is your ticket to actually get started on that journey.
Yeah, I love that. It's so interesting because for some people, both masturbation and mindfulness are difficult or tricky spaces. But
Sure.
if you're familiar or comfortable with one, yeah, introduce the other.
Yeah. Well, so are there any other like guidelines or recommendations, good ideas for people who are looking to maybe add a little bit of romance and panache to their self-love?
Oh yeah, I think I've used the word intentional and intentionality a couple times. That's really where it's at, is making the masturbation that you're about to do different than that quick pull up the first video on Pornhub. We're just going to do this so I can fall asleep tonight. That's your maintenance masturbation. That's fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. If you don't want that quickie, then what you want is to say, do what I did, ban yourself from Pornhub for this particular experience. Set yourself a timer for longer than it usually takes you and challenge yourself to drag the experience out a little longer. If you do appreciate things like bubble baths, scented candles, using scented massage oils on the exterior parts of your body, not the interior, because those are bad on the interior parts.
Read the label.
Yeah. If those are things that make you feel good, that's kind of the point. Do things that make you feel good when you're trying to make yourself feel good. So whatever is romance for you, if it's going out camping and doing yourself in a tent, then that's for you. Do that. Do what works for you.
I love that. That is great advice. And on that note, I don't know about you guys, but I am ready to hear from some callers and what they have to share with us. And also, don't forget, if you would like to call in and weigh in on any of these topics we've discussed or something else, go ahead and give us a call at 512-991-9242 or visit us at tiny.cc/callsex. And so first up, I think we should hear from Aaron in Kansas. Pronouns are he, him. and he's going to talk to us a little bit about gender abolition. Aaron, welcome to the show. How's it going? Can you hear us, Aaron?
Hi, Shannon. Hi, Kara. Hi, Christy. Sorry, my phone was muted. Thanks for having me. I did want to talk about gender abolitionism. I just didn't know if this was the right show to do it.
No problem. You came
We'll
to
see
the
what
right
we can do. Yeah, what's on your mind?
So I have a best friend who recently came out as trans and fully supporting her in her journey. Maddie, if you're listening, what's up? Shout out. But as we were talking about her wanting to be identified as a woman, as opposed to a man, I was wondering what she sort of expected sort of society or the world to treat her differently as. If she's identifying, if she's expressing herself as a woman, what is it that she's asking the world to do in return when they meet that expression? And as, the conversation got in depth and we started to talk about, what it means to be non-binary as opposed to, settling on being a man or being a woman or something entirely different, gender abolition came up. And neither of us really understood what it meant to just throw the gender bucket out of the window. And so I thought I would go and seek out people who maybe are more familiar with the topic and what the implications of gender abolitionism is. And you can talk me through it. And maybe I can go back to Maddie and we can have a more informed conversation.
Great. Yeah. Aaron, I love to hear that your first thought was to make sure that you're being supportive of your friend. I think that's really, really speaks highly
Absolutely.
of you and your friendship. So thank you for doing that. And for our viewers who might not be familiar, when you're talking about gender abolitionism, what exactly do you mean by that? Or is that what you wanted us to discuss further?
Well, yes, I did want to discuss further specifically what it means, because gender is such a complicated topic, I think. Or it's a layered topic. It doesn't have to be complicated. I think sometimes people they stress themselves out trying to just accept people for who they are. But for gender abolitionism, I guess the way we were understanding it is that, we sort of throw out gender norms, we throw out gender expressions, and people just are, more than my pronouns. I'm just my name. And there's not really conceptually, when you hear woman or hear man, nothing is supposed to instantiate is in your mind. You're just supposed to see the person first. That's sort of where gender abolition, that's how we were talking about it, but I don't know how practical that is. I don't know. So that's why I come to you and come to others to learn more about what that means or what that could mean.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? The practicality, because we can all sit here and contemplate our navels and discuss what an idealized society might look like. And we can maybe suss this out. I'm curious to hear from the two of you. I'm not so convinced that a utopian society is without gender. I might say that gender is a lot less prescriptive and condemning than our modern society is. But I don't know. It definitely seems like there's not a lot of opportunity to abolish gender if we actually did have access to that button. It's something people cling pretty strongly to. How do y'all feel about the notion of a utopia without gender?
I love this question. Thank you for calling in with this question, Aaron. I actually recently had a conversation about this with someone else too, and I'm of two minds on this. And I'm going to make the perennial non-binary joke. I have a hard time, landing on just one thing. But on the one hand, I personally do love the idea or the fantasy of, what if we just didn't have gender, threw it out the window and just don't even think about it anymore. You're not going to be imposing any thing on anyone. And to me, that would feel really comfortable. I would love that personally. something I have come to realize over time, having conversations with other people when I tell them that I'm non-binary, is that actually a lot of people, it seems to me, really do find a lot of value and meaning in their gender identity as a man or a woman or whatever it is. And to take that away from them could be, very, very traumatic and upsetting. In the same way that I feel upset by someone trying to force a gender identity onto me that I don't identify with, taking it away from someone, in some ways could be a similar experience, I suppose. So that's something I've been kind of dealing with myself. And then on the other hand, I do kind of have the sense that, gender is to me one of those social constructs like race, which is to say that gender really, to my mind, doesn't exist outside of the framework of sexism and discrimination. And so it is kind of built into it, if you will. So it is problematic, in a systemic way, I think, too. So there I am, not taking a position.
I mean, Kara,
I really appreciate that, because that's sort of where Maddie's point was coming from, was that, she feels that she's a woman. And even if that isn't like a prescriptive concept, it's a descriptive concept, or maybe I'm getting the words mixed up. She felt as though that identity shouldn't be taken from her, but also that she sees a problematic history behind genderifying things completely. So we didn't know what the least problematic position was, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in some sort of fantasy, I guess we could think of it in terms of everybody having their own gender, where everybody's just allowed to be who they are. And I've definitely pointed out on this show that I think that there's value in that idea. I think it's not unreasonable to imagine that there are some 7.5 or however many human beings we're up to billion genders on the planet. But then that does beg the question, like, well, what does that word even mean then? If everybody has their own, is this really a category? And I take your point, Kara, that there's a lot of history of these categories being used almost exclusively, if not entirely exclusively, for problematic reasons. But I just really, truly believe that people are going to want to find their like kind and their opposite kind, and they're going to want to have some sort of category here. I appreciate the equivocating. Shannon, do you have anything any more finite for us?
Kara totally took all the words right out of my mouth. It's, as a non-binary person myself, personally, what is gender? I don't know. Whereas at the same time, I'm not going to, invalidate someone else's experience of feeling like they are a particular gender, and especially who have struggled with that, to define that, made moves to try to live it more, or feel they can't make moves to like, there's no way someone's going through all of that if they don't feel pretty passionately about gender. So yeah. I'm not about to, take that away from them.
Yeah. So Aaron, I think the closest any of us can get to anything substantive would be to say that, yes, as a society, like the larger global culture needs to change some ideas around gender. That is very obviously on display in this country right now. There is a lot of problems. And if you gave me a magic button to either maintain the status quo or somehow delete the concept of gender from the source code of the universe, maybe I'd push it. Maybe. But I don't have access to that button. So it feels almost silly to get too hung up on some of these ideas, because we can be pushing for a better society, and maybe someday we'll all collectively agree that that's the society we want. I don't think I'm going to live to see it. But as far as would anybody ever want that society, we can look at different anthropological studies around the world of small communities, people who live in something more resembling what we imagine most humans across most of humanity have lived like. And we see some very bizarre, well, I'll say bizarre, but just some unique and interesting ideas that are around gender that are so different from what we sort of as a larger society believe things should be. What does that really mean? What can we actually take from that? I think anybody who pretends to have that answer is full of shit. It's too much of a singularity. We're not going to be able to see that reality anytime soon. Could it happen? Could we create a society where there was truly a singular race, where there was a true opportunity to have a unique or diverse gender? Maybe, I guess, sure. But it's mostly posturing. And I would encourage people now to be working towards affirming the rights of all genders rather than trying to get rid of genders.
No, I really appreciate all three of your perspectives on this. You're touching on a lot of this really sounds similar to the conversation I was having with my friend Maddie about this, about making sure we respect sort of the people where they're at, even if we might have greater questions about that, utopic society that you mentioned, Christy. I don't know. Part of me feels like maybe it's an unavoidable colliding point in the future where people who are, say, non-binary and people who are trans and people who are, say, a woman, a cis woman, they are all competing over how we should respect their identities. And I just want to make sure I'm not on the wrong side of that collision, I guess, is the reason for my question.
Well, I think that we can respect vanilla and chocolate equally. Like, they don't have to be in competition with each other. And I don't think that our femmes and demi-boys and butches and cat girls and however the hell else we want to describe ourselves needs to be anything more than a personal descriptor. It doesn't need to be something that we rank or compete around. Now, maybe you can say that that's just sort of human nature. I don't know that I truly believe that. I think that it's much more nuanced and complicated the way that people are able to operate in places of abundance. I don't know. I don't want to get too far down a anthropological or a evolutionary psychology rabbit hole, because even though I find that really fascinating, I want to very much acknowledge that it's a little bit like alchemy. Evolutionary psychology is really, really interesting stuff, but we have to acknowledge what we don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that, Christy, too. And I kind of want to go back to what you started with, Aaron, in this conversation, which was that you were trying to make sure that you were supporting your friend. And, I think that that's possible to do, regardless of whether we solve the philosophical question of, what if it was like this or what if it was like that? And, would the world be a better place if X, Y, and Z? And maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But if that's not the world that we currently live in now anyway, maybe that's not what our focus has to be on. I tend to think that sometimes people are surprised when they hear about people who are having a more expansive conception of gender. And maybe the knee-jerk reaction is to think, kind of like y'all were saying, well, this is a zero-sum game. If they get their gender, I lose mine, I don't think it really has to be that way.
Yeah, it most likely doesn't. Honestly, as I was speaking to her, I asked if there was anything in her day-to-day life that was going to change. She's still going to play video games. She's still going to play basketball. She's still going to do pretty much a mix of what one might stereotypically categorize as masculine, but also gender-neutral things, or feminine things, like pretty much everything that I know of this person for the last, 8 years that we've been friends. Their day-to-day activities are going to stay the same. She's just wanting me to respect her gender identity. I'm going to do so. So I just wanted to talk about what I might be missing, I don't know. Maybe this is just, like you say, like alchemy, like ethereal, conceptual stuff that just practically won't manifest.
And being curious about alchemy led to a lot of understanding of chemistry and physics. So yeah, let's acknowledge that it's a little bit on the bleeding edge of what we understand about the world, but it's okay to play there as long as we don't take anything too seriously.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well,
I appreciate the feedback. I'll be sure to share this call when it goes on YouTube. Yeah, thank you all for having me.
great. Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate the call. That was great. Have a good one.
You too.
All right. Well, that was a great call. I'm really glad we had that conversation.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So thanks for calling, Aaron. And yeah, I hope Maddie gets a chance to check it out too. And meanwhile, after that great call, let's segue briefly over and take a look at what's been going on some of the other ACA shows.
Hell, I mean, I've been having sex with myself for like 25 years, and I still am discovering new things. I'm still like weirding myself out. I'm still surprising myself. After all these years, it's still special.
He's a PhD
Yeah.
who believes the Nephilim of the Bible. The ancient giants described in the Bible built pyramids.
Yep.
You go to school for like 8 years and you're like, yeah, man, it was giants.
I know.
I live in a blue state, so people will say, oh, don't worry, your uterus is fine, your rights are fine. But I genuinely give no flying about that when millions of women in over 13 states so far have essentially lost their entire bodily autonomy.
If there is truly an afterlife where myself and Ben will go and party and I will no longer have these rashes that he refuses to look at, if that's the case, what the am I waiting for?
We use inductive reasoning in science because deductive reasoning is rife with fallacies and bias. We use inductive reasoning because that way we look at what the evidence says and draw a conclusion from it rather than trying to rule out conclusions based on the only things that we can possibly think of.
Okay, well, I referenced it a moment ago, but we have talked before about so many just bullshit myths around masturbation. Ideas like you're going to go blind, you're going to grow hairy palms, you're going to become schizophrenic, that you'll no longer be a virgin in the eyes of God, or that you'll cause penis damage or addiction or ruin your sex life. I mean, are there any other myths that I'm missing? Anything stand out for y'all?
I mean, you got the big ones. The other big one that I know of is that just women can't orgasm, period.
Oh, yeah.
The
female orgasm is a myth.
So don't try. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so outside of the no fap movement and fight the new drug and all of these bullshit peddlers, are there any actual bona fide concerns that we should be aware of regarding our masturbation?
Generally speaking, things to watch out for with masturbation, and I don't think these will be surprising because you hear stories of when it's gone wrong, and these are sort of generally physically extreme situations where someone is trying something like what's it, why am I forgetting it now, the word for asphyxiating yourself, autoerotic asphyxiation. It really can't be done safely. Like, we just have yet to figure out like a sure, safe way for someone to alone do that.
Yeah, let me just jump in and say that's a bondage issue, right?
Yeah,
like anybody
you know.
who spends time studying and becoming aware of their safe, sane, and consensual kink will tell you that you never tie somebody up when they're alone. You never leave somebody who's tied up by themselves. And that includes masturbation. I mean, yeah, that's a bondage issue.
Right. So there's that one. And then, of course, insertables are a big one. So, you know, if you are including anal play in your masturbation, which highly encourage, do it, try it if you haven't, you got to make sure you're using the right kind of stuff, because if you wind up with something stuck in there you can't get out, that's an ER trip, which for a lot of people, especially in the US, is not an easy trip to make for multiple reasons outside of just the general awkwardness. And
if you're not familiar with the term flared base, make sure to Google that thoroughly before putting anything in your butt. Nobody listening to this should put anything in their butt until they've learned that phrase. That's everybody's homework. Sorry to keep interrupting you.
No, it's so important. I'm so glad you're saying it. You know, open an incognito window and Google how big of a flared base do I need on my butt plug. Like, just type that in, because there are plenty of educators writing really awesome guides about this stuff. The information is out there. And if you can't afford an ER trip, or if you don't desire one, then you need to know this information. For people who are interested in sounding, which is insertables into your urethra, I would hope it'd be obvious, but for some reason, apparently it's not, but avoid glass. I know that there are glass dildos, for example, that are built that aren't very breakable, but the thinness required for sounding tends to make things more breakable. So look for, well-built, usually like steel things for that. Yes, these are all like, they're totally fine. Anal play is totally fine. Sounding totally. If it's your kink, that's totally fine. You do you. Just, do it safely, do it informed. Look up the information out there because it is out there, and just do a little research before you dive into that. Other than that, sometimes over-enthusiastic masturbation can sometimes result in, the rubbing and chafing and things like that, which can be treated at home if you can leave yourself alone long enough to do so. And
this
it does
is a problem for partnered sex as well, right?
Yeah, totally.
Invest in good lubricant, learn your lotions, find out what
Yeah.
feels right for your body, find what feels good for you.
We love lube. So much lube. But yeah, on the physical side, there's that. And then of course, on the less physical side, you've got the girlfriend calling me because her boyfriend won't have sex anymore because he's masturbating multiple times a day and just doesn't seem interested in sex anymore. And again, many different things happening there. Usually, more often than not, masturbation is not the core actual problem. It's a big symptom. It's the thing that everyone sees. You're going, oh, wow, look, that's happening. There's a lot of masturbation. But the masturbation is usually a symptom of something else going on. So don't worry about, oh, masturbation is going to turn me into that person, right? But do notice if that is happening in your relationship and say, okay, there's something we need to talk about here.
Yeah. Well, are there any particular red flags, warning signs, anything you might highlight for us that masturbation is beginning to creep into our relationship or cause problems here?
Yeah, I think if you're arguing a lot about it, there's some lines here because different people have different tolerance levels for, how much their partner masturbates and how much they themselves do. And, whether or not porn is okay to watch in your relationship or not, right? That varies from relationship to relationship. So if things change from the beginning, so if you started your relationship and masturbation wasn't really a problem, it seems like each of you, let's say, for example, masturbated a few times a week and neither of you really had a problem with that. And now it's a few months later and one partner is masturbating much more often and the other partner is noticing and it's causing some friction in the relationship. It's worth having a conversation. It doesn't mean there's a big problem. It might just mean that someone's going through a spell of heightened arousal and needs a few extra, sessions with themselves throughout the week without putting too much pressure on their partner for partnered sex, which masturbation is great for, by the way. Different things can cause your libido to rise and fall over the course of your life and obviously a relationship. Masturbation is a great way to take care of that without putting extra pressure on your partner to suddenly participate in a lot more sex that they may not necessarily be in the mood for. So just talking about it is a great place to start. If you find yourself, and this is when I don't usually see people until they're spending a lot of money on accessing porn that they wouldn't normally be able to access, and they're worried about their finances, that's where I start to see people really going, okay, I need help now. Or people losing their jobs because they've masturbated on the job and gotten caught. They're getting irresponsible with where they're masturbating. Now you're really obviously starting to get into parts where it's affecting your life, not just your relationship.
Yeah. I feel like there is a very complicated conversation that we're maybe not having as a culture about sexual access to our partners. Dosey Easton of The Ethical Slut talks about the tyranny of hydraulics, just the inevitability of the lack or the limitations of the number of orgasms you can have, the amount of tumescence that your body can manage. How do we manage all of that? How should we feel about our obligations to our partners in terms of bodily autonomy and sexual access in these things?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, no one wants to make their partner do something they don't want to do. And no one should feel like they have to, like they are. It's not fun if you're obligated, right?
Mm.
And consent gets really fuzzy there if it's coerced, if someone's pressured into something, and you don't want that either. At the same time, we are, for the most part, sexual beings. There are exceptions there. Obviously, asexual people exist. But, the typical person entering a sexual relationship with someone, and it's known at the beginning of the relationship that we're both interested in having sex with each other, you're going to expect to still have access to sex for probably, hopefully, the duration of that relationship, unless you discuss otherwise. And when one person's desire for that dips, that can be really tough to deal with. Every couple deals with it differently. Some people are comfortable riding out the dip until something, brings desire back, or it just naturally comes back on its own. Other people loosen the rules of their relationship a bit, and maybe allow for experiences outside of their arrangement. This is where non-monogamy often can come in for some people, or even just permission to go to places like strip clubs or pay for an OnlyFans account access, or something like that, where you're just kind of bending the rules a little bit. You'll also have people who get into mindful masturbation and, figure out how to meet a whole lot more of their own needs and are able to keep that pressure off their partner. And then, as many, coaches and therapists will encourage, they call this usually a mismatched libido. So the lower libido partner will be encouraged, don't do anything you don't want to do, but do consider like what it would take for you to feel ready to do it. Like, how can you take steps towards, getting close? Can you be in the room while your partner masturbates? Or is that something you're comfortable with? And figuring out what that looks like individually for those people in those partnerships. It's going to be a completely unique solution for each partnership. There is no one size fits all solution to this particular problem.
Yeah, but the solution, so to speak, that I'm hearing you say is talk about it.
Whoa, what?
Talk about it.
No, we can't talk about sex. No.
Yeah, Jesus.
Embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's so scary to talk about sex.
Yeah, well, and if you can't, then maybe just put this podcast or video on in the background and see if you can't start or spark a conversation there.
That is as soon as I got into coaching, immediate, all the questions that I was getting on my free question asking line, 80% of them I had to respond with, well, have you mentioned this to your partner yet?
Sure.
This whole thing you just sent me, does your partner know yet? Have you talked about it yet? And oftentimes the response was, no, I haven't. I'm too scared. And I had to create a whole resource of just like, here's a workbook on how to start talking about sex first. Get back to me once you've talked about it.
Yeah.
Well, we have talked to so-called sex addiction experts. We've talked to neurologists and psychologists, a medical doctor. I mean, we've done a lot to debunk the popular notions of porn addiction, but there are a lot of grandiose claims about how pornography or masturbation can rewire your brain or change your physical reaction to sexual stimulation. Are these claims based on anything that we should be aware of?
They're based almost entirely on the experiences of the people who are self-described addicts. I keep researching this because it's something that was really stuck with me as I did my studies to become a coach, and we had to write papers on this, particular topic because it's such a big area of contention. And all the research I've found has found that pretty much all these biggest claims are self-described sex addicts or porn addicts coming forward and saying, I experience a rewiring of my brain. And while I don't want to, tell anyone that their experience isn't valid, I do think that it's interesting that it seems like, because addiction is a convenient word to describe these experiences, it's the thing people type into Google. It's the kind of thing that would maybe lend itself to an addiction treatment center that could make money. I think even in my own marketing, I've used the phrase sex addiction and porn addiction simply to get search engine optimization to get those people in my door so we could talk about what addiction really is and what they are actually experiencing. And again and again, I thought there was a wonderful study. These students just went through Reddit and pulled all this data from user experiences who were self-described, addicts, and found that the commonalities between them were not any special level of sexual. There was no hypersexuality that was out of normal range compared to normal people experiencing sexual desire. The thing they had in common tended to be religion and a sense of sexual shame, and a sense that withholding is a value, like the idea of holding back and restraint is something to be admired in a person. And that was the common thread between sex addicts.
Isn't that incredibly telling? That most or that there's such a huge correlation between, quote, sex addiction and sexual shame and religiosity and body shame and all of these different kinds of things.
Yeah, most of these people are people who just have normal sexual desire and just feel ashamed about it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, having grown up in the very evangelical church. It was pretty much assumed that any use of pornography or any kind of sex aid that would have to do with masturbation was by definition called a sex addiction. Just if you ever used it, you had a sex addiction.
Because why would anybody ever want to masturbate unless they had to?
You degenerate, you.
Yeah. So I think people hear that term and then, any amount is automatically an addiction. There's no real thought given to, well, what makes something an addiction versus just a normal behavior? And yeah, that's something you learn.
Yeah.
Well, with all of these different pitfalls, are there any guidelines that you might want to offer for how to have a healthy relationship with porn?
Oh, I love this question so much because so I see, having a difficult relationship with masturbation and porn as being sort of on a spectrum. And you can self-identify yourself. Are you on the side where you are sort of masturbation or porn avoidant? There are things that make you feel nervous or ashamed or scared of masturbation and porn? Or are you on the other side where you're sort of maybe over enthusiastic or highly enthusiastic about porn and masturbation, maybe to the point that, you think you're sort of edging into a territory where you maybe go into debt to access porn that other people can't access, or, risk your job by masturbating at work kind of thing. What side are you on there? And decide for yourself how close you want to get to the middle, what feels comfortable for you, what feels healthy for you, because again, this is unique to each individual. Your masturbation habits are as unique to you as like your sleep habits are, or whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. All these things are just yours. And so figure out whether you're trying to become more comfortable with masturbation because you feel like you'd like more of it in your life, or whether you'd like to have a better relationship with masturbation and porn because you feel like maybe you're leaning on it a little too much and you'd like to lean on it less and develop some other, habits to fill that space.
That's great. And Shannon, while we've got you here, I want to give our callers a chance to pick your brain as well and ask you their questions. And we have one in the queue now. And don't forget, if you are watching or listening and you would like to ask, you can give us a call at 512-991-9242 or visit us at tiny.cc/callsex. And let's go ahead and talk with Jacob. Pronouns are he, him. He's calling in from Oklahoma. So let me see if we can get him on the line. Jacob, how are you doing? Can you hear us? Hey, welcome.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. How are you guys?
Doing well. All right. Sounds like you were going to ask a question to do with exploring newly discovered sexuality. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was raised like fire and brimstone evangelical Christian. And recently I've came out of that, and alongside that, I've discovered that I'm bisexual. And I just don't know where to begin with it, really. Like, there's like shame there, and I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry you're experiencing shame, but welcome to bisexuality. As a bisexual myself, I'm glad to have you here.
It's a nice feature.
Yeah, it's not all bad, I promise. I would say start with what you're comfortable with, right? You don't need to, don't listen to any ideas you have, anything you've been told of what bisexuality looks like or is, or what you have to do to be one. You're not required to do anything. You're already there. You're already bisexual. You're sitting here already there. So you've already won the being bisexual game, right? By identifying it's who you are. I like to describe, when I talk about comfort zones and stepping out of them, if you can sort of picture 3 circles. One's really big and it sort of fills up, your whole known universe. One's sort of medium sized, and then one's really, really small in the middle. And it doesn't have to be super small because it is your comfort zone, but that is the space where you're comfortable. You're comfortable sitting on your couch, eating your favorite meal, being in your home, being with people who love you. When you want to step out of your comfort zone, you're just going to step slightly into that middle-sized circle. You're just going to get out of the small one into the middle, test it out, tease it. But you're not going to go so far that you're in the giant universe-filling circle, because that's a panic zone. It's too much. It's too big.
Yeah.
So just, take small bites.
That's an interesting way to explain it. I like that.
It's worth remembering that you don't owe anybody any sexuality, right? Like, you don't owe it to anybody to go out and be more bi. And that, I think, includes yourself. I think that you will enjoy the exploration, and I think a little bit of exploring by yourself might be more comfortable right now. And as you're getting comfortable, enjoy all of that. I sincerely believe that you will, but you don't owe it to anybody, and it's fine if you don't get around to it, or if you don't have the space for it right now, or if this isn't the moment, or if it is a huge, massive project in your life, or something you just occasionally think about.
Yeah, focus on what you would like to do and start there.
Okay. One issue I have is that I just feel I live in a small town, and I just feel pretty alone. And I don't know. I just don't think in my current scenario I'll ever have an opportunity to explore anything like that.
Oh, I definitely feel you. I lived on a small island for a long time where I had to stay closeted, and it was not easy. But I will say, and it's funny that it's this themed show that I can share this on, but it was masturbation and fantasy where I got to really start exploring my own bisexuality. So that's definitely one really easy private place you can start that no one has to know about.
I think that's incredibly important advice, and I would encourage you to enjoy that fantasy life. And then to just a thought to keep in your back pocket, perhaps for years from now when you're ready for it. No matter where you are, we hear it all the time on these ACA shows. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I can't find a single like-minded person anywhere near me. And then come to find out there is a great atheist group, that there is a great kink group, that there is a great this or that or the other thing. We joked about it a couple of weeks ago. It really is true. No matter where you are, if you have internet access, you will find somebody on Grindr. It's just a fact of life. That may not be what you're looking for right now. That's super valid. You don't need to search those things out. I recognize that there are places in this world where being outly bisexual is a very dangerous thing, and I fucking hate that for you and for everybody else, Jacob. But nevertheless, it is also true that there are bisexual, gay, straight, all kinds of pansexual and diverse people everywhere that you are. And I'm sure a lot of them would be very interested in your right swipe.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. I think y'all have helped me, so I'll let y'all go. But that's the first time I've ever told anyone I'm bisexual. So thank y'all for that.
No, thank you so much.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that with us. That was a pretty big way to make a splash with that too. So thanks for doing it here with us and for giving us a call. And feel free to call back and let us know how it's going.
How your journey goes, please do.
All right. Thanks, Jacob. Bye.
Yeah. Before we jump back into it, Shan, I wanted to ask a quick question that showed up in the text chat. Is it fair to say that masturbation is still masturbation, even if it doesn't include or lead up to an orgasm?
Oh, so I'm going to ask a question response first and let everyone listening answer it for themselves before I share my answer. Is it still sex if you don't orgasm? And for me, I say yes. If you're deriving sexual pleasure from it, I say yes. And so I think for you, if the answer is yes, then yes, it's still masturbation, even if you don't orgasm. If for you the answer is no, you don't count it as sex if you don't orgasm, then maybe your answer is no.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anybody who wants to rattle their fist at this guy, let me encourage you to check out Sexual Intelligence by Marty Klein, which is basically 600-700 pages saying expand your definition of sex. Sex is not just penis in vagina. I mean, where we started this show, there's no necessary ingredients. So yeah, I'm with you. If it felt like masturbation to you, it was masturbation.
If someone caught you halfway through doing it, would they call it masturbation?
Yeah, would they call it masturbation? Yeah, there's a reasonable person standard I think we can apply here.
I mean, given that it's a solo activity, like who's going to argue with you? I mean,
Yeah, no, that's an important point.
Yeah. You define your masturbation.
Yeah, so we tiptoed around some ideas for Jacob, but are there any other maybe resources or directions that you might point people towards if they wanted to expand their understanding of their sexuality, maybe wanted to expand their practice of masturbation?
Yeah, I am personally kind of a big book nerd. So I've got a number of books that I recommend for people who are looking into this. One, especially for my clients who want the kind of information you can get regardless of your body and gender, is Bang, Masturbation for People of All Genders and Abilities. That's a really great place to start. And that one is short and sweet, and I have room, I can share it on here. So this is Bang. Lots of great illustrations. For those who like a quick read, it's pretty quick. And then if you want something a little bit more in depth, from the same publisher is Unfuck Your Intimacy. And this has a workbook that goes with it. This also goes into, of course, relationship sex as well, but there's a lot in here about masturbation and using it to get to those levels of sex where you feel much more connected and in the moment. A slightly older one is called Girl Boner. That's a fun one that also comes with a workbook and definitely geared towards people who identify as a woman or female, but is inclusive of all bodies. And then one that's more towards cis women, who you've probably heard of, is Come As You Are. And that one, again, includes a lot of information about relationships as well, but also has great sections on how to touch yourself maybe a little differently or in a way that is new. If you're open to it, I got a hot tip yesterday on a sex educator who started an OnlyFans to very intentionally do educational videos on vulva masturbation for vulva owners who would like more information. And I have not checked it out yet, but I've heard it's really great. And a lot of people are having their first orgasms thanks to this content creator. So if you'd like that, I can share theirs as well.
Yeah, no, throw it out there. And then I'll say to anybody watching along, to anybody listening as they jog through the park or whatever else, that all of the resources we're talking about are going to be in the show notes for this episode.
Awesome. Yeah. So on OnlyFans, her username is Kayleigh. That's Kayleigh. Isabella, Isabella, and that's all one word, Kayleigh Isabella. I'm going to be checking that out very soon. I just found it. I just was told yesterday, and I'm like, okay, it's on my list.
Yeah, beautiful. So we'll make sure to put that in front of folks. Are there any other practices? Any, we've talked about lighting candles. We've talked about getting in the bath. We've talked about this mindful masturbation. And I guess I just want to keep repeating that so that people feel like they have a entryway to some of these things and don't get stuck in that rut. So any other advice that you can offer us here?
Start with a meditation app if you're not already meditating. So that's a great way to start. You don't even have to masturbate while you do it. Just meditate. Just try to do the mindfulness exercises first. If you are already doing that, then, your next step is to try and do it while you're on your own. And if you haven't spent a lot of time with yourself in that way, then start spending time with yourself in that way and use the mindfulness as a lead-in. Just be present with it, be open to it, be patient. Please be patient with yourself, because it is not something that happens like very quickly or easily. It is going to be sort of a journey, and something that, you have to open yourself up to experiencing as it unfolds.
Well, and I want to ask a follow-up question too. For the people who might be in the audience, I don't know if they would be in this situation, but as someone who got along an embarrassingly long time in life without really knowing about this topic at all, or where to start, I want to ask the embarrassing question for other people who might be in the same situation I was. But like, what if you don't know how to begin at all? Do you have any resources or ideas for that?
The Bang book is one of my favorites because it has illustrations and suggestions. And if you are comfortable with OnlyFans, having someone very intentionally instruct you through, here's how you touch yourself, is great. There are guided mindful masturbation recorded sessions online. That's another great incognito window Google search you can do.
And there are actually a few of those sorts of guides that I've already got on my website that people can find a link to, again, here in the show notes. So if any of this makes you uncomfortable to Google, be curious about that. I'm not going to judge you for it. Do what you got to do. But if it makes you uncomfortable, I'd want to ask you why, and if there's anything we can do about that. And if you are uncomfortable, that's okay. Come over to my website. Everybody will think that you're just interested in talking to a therapist, and who could get mad about that?
Yeah. And if you prefer your stuff to be shared in a more story-like format, there is a free podcast called Come With Us, that is C-U-M, Come With Us, and it's actually erotica. So you're listening to erotic stories that are voiced by voice actors, but they get pretty descriptive with what's happening down there. And so if you much prefer something that's more of a story format than a feeling like you're going to school, then Come With Us can be a fun way to listen to the kinds of things people are doing.
Beautiful. Well, I think those are some really incredible tips. I'll say it just one last time. Everything that we've talked about can be found online in the show notes for this episode, including the articles that Shannon has written on these topics for people who are wanting to explore these ideas a little bit further. But Sharon, where can people learn more about you and about your work?
Yeah, I'm on most social media platforms as @Sex Coach Shannon. I've also got a website, sexcoachshannon.com, and there's a blog there, so you can read whatever's on my mind this week at that blog. If you're not big on social media, just shoot me an email at hello@sexcoachshannon.com.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I bet you will have generated a lot of questions after this. That was really great. And I know there's people out there who are looking for that resource. So thank you.
And I'm so excited to hear from them.
Yes, that's fantastic. And in addition to Shannon's links, don't forget you can keep up with what's happening with the ACA on our website at atheist-community.org. Or email this show at sex@atheist-community.org, or email the ACA at tv@atheist-community.org. And if you want to check out the podcast, visit us on tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. That is your one-stop shop where you can catch the audio version of the show. And if you want to get more involved with a community kind of thing, check us out on Facebook with the Secular Sexuality fan group. We're all in there ready to interact, so please check it out. And then there's also, if you prefer, tiny.cc/ACD Discord. You can find us on there. A very lively group. Definitely recommend it. And then if you want some merch, there's tiny.cc/merch ACA, which I continually try to pronounce as merchaka, and it is not merchaka, it's merch ACA. But if that helps you remember it, then type that in. But there's some really cool stuff you can find there. It's the best place to get your sexy swag. So please check us out. And then last but definitely not least is we really want to give a shout out to the crew that makes everything possible so that you guys and gals and non-binary pals can all have access to this wonderful content. Thank you all for making this possible.
Yeah, well, we have covered a lot of ground tonight, and there's still so much more to talk about, right? Like we should be talking about how to discuss masturbation with our partners. We should be talking about mutual masturbation and some of the benefits that can come from exploring your body with your partner, and maybe working through some of that shame you may have around your body, around masturbation, and some of these other things. There is so much more to get into, but with all that in mind, Shannon, are there any sort of final thoughts or last impressions you'd like to leave with the audience tonight?
I mean, it is your body and you're not hurting anyone by touching it. So go out there and touch your body, you know, do what feels good.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I want to make sure to encourage everybody listening tonight to grab some lube, like a lot of lube, to maybe light a candle, to find a toy with a nice flared base, and badger the witness or tickle the pickle.
Or maybe put on a puppet show.
Hold a sausage hostage.
Ring the devil's doorbell.
Celebrate Palm Sunday.
Take a self-guided tour.
Null the void.
Debug the hard drive.
Mind the gap.
Diddle the skittle.
Or dot the I and give yourself a big ol' orgasm. Or maybe better yet, maybe not, give somebody else one.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/ytth and call into the show